This is my Pentium 3 computer, which I primarily use for playing old 90s computer games. But it needs some upgrades, so today we're gonna perform those. Let's get started. There are a few critical upgrades which we need to perform on this system today. The first one being the motherboard. This computer currently has this Intel motherboard, and while it gets the job done, it really is missing some features which I'd like to have. So we're gonna be switching it out with this Aopen one instead. This is an Aopen AX6BC, and it's a very good slot 1 motherboard. In fact, it's probably one of the best money can buy, especially for the later Pentium 3 generation. Whilst it still uses the 440BX chipset, it's got a whole host of really nice features which most slot 1 motherboards generally wouldn't have. Now, this gaming PC has a Voodoo 3 in it already, as well as a Pentium 3 550, so I think this motherboard would be a lot better to use rather than that crappy Intel one. And also, the Intel motherboard's in really bad condition, as you can see here, whereas the Aopen one is brand new pretty much. I think it's about time we go ahead and install that Aopen motherboard, so let's first turn the computer around and then unscrew the thumb screws. From there, we can pull the side cover off with ease. Now we need to remove all the expansion cards from this system, which is a relatively easy task. And yeah, while this system doesn't have many cards, it sure has some nice ones. First of all is Voodoo 3, which has a cooling fan on it. Next we have a Sound Blaster Live, model SB0060. And then we just have a generic network card. Now it's time to uninstall our Intel motherboard, which was pretty hard with all these cables in the way, but I managed to get it out eventually. Now we need to uninstall the Pentium 3 550 CPU, and also the 256MB of SD RAM. The 20-year-old fans on this Pentium 3 550 weren't working at all, so I had grand ambitions to remove them and then replace it with a Pentium 4 cooler fan. And while that seemed great in theory, it turns out the fan wasn't working at all. It must have a different kind of power system on these later model fans. So I ended up just using a big 120mm fan inside of the system. But yeah, here is me installing the broken fan either way. Now with our new Aopen motherboard, I'll install the Pentium 3 550. I was actually debating upgrading this system to a Pentium 3 800, but I decided it might be a little bit overpowered for the Voodoo 3, though I'm having second thoughts about that now. Next, I'll install the 256MB of SD RAM into the new motherboard. Sure, I could have gone with more, but all the games I'm playing really won't take advantage of it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Now it's time to install our new Aopen motherboard into the existing case. It was pretty hard to get in there, but I managed eventually. Now we need to screw the motherboard in to make sure it doesn't fall out. From there, we can go ahead and plug back in all the power cables, as well as the IDE cables. Now I'll install all the cards back into the system, so we can try out the new motherboard. I'll install the Voodoo 3, Sound Blaster Live, and the network card. Now it's time to power up the computer to see if it works. And what do you know, it posts straight away. As we can see, everything is detecting perfectly. Once we load into Windows 98, I'll fire up CPU-Z and just make sure everything is detecting as it should. And yeah, going through all the tabs, everything appears to be correct, which is great. I've loaded up 3D Mark 99 here, so we can see the raw capabilities of our system, and as you can see, everything appears to be running great. Some of the earlier 3D demos are really wacky, but that's what's really interesting about them to me. The Voodoo 3 really pulls its weight in this system, along with that Aopen motherboard and Pentium 3 CPU. I think it's about time we go ahead and try out some games now, so let's start with Turok. And I've figured out how to capture audio now, so you can hear the game. Let's try out some SimCity 2000 next. How about some motocross madness next? Followed by some Need for Speed. And some Counter-Strike 1.0, though this game's pretty boring without any other players. Well, that's about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the upgrade. Anyway, I'll see you next time.